Hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Facebook Live and Zoom meeting for the opportunity to talk about our guidelines for reopening schools. I'm going to ask if you're joining us on Zoom that you would make sure that your microphone is muted, and that will help us out to eliminate any feedback that we may get. But thank you for joining us this evening. Several things we want to talk about, and I know that during this time there has been a lot of uncertainty. A lot of questions that have been asked of whether or not we're going to be able to return to school and what that return to school may look like. And I'm happy to report to you tonight that we are planning to return to school. And our effective start date is going to be Thursday, August the 13th, and that will be our return to school date. And there's many things that we're going to talk about tonight as parents are going to have options and choices to make when it comes to a virtual school setting or a traditional school setting. I believe it's important that we return to school. I believe that our kids are dependent on the adults that are in the building. They need relationships with their friends, and they need that opportunity to have that traditional school experience. I also understand from the economy's perspective that it's important that we reopen schools for the fact that we need to help our businesses. I know many of you are dependent upon jobs, that it's very difficult for you to find reliable child care and also do the job that you've been called to do. And so our economy depends on us in some form or fashion reopening schools and try to return to a sense of normalcy as much as possible. I also realize that our health care concerns are very great, that the virus is a very real virus. It has differing effects on people. And so we have to balance between all of these things that we've been presented to safely, effectively open schools for our kids and for the adults that will be in those buildings educating kids. And so tonight we're going to outline our plan that we have to talk to you about that. And tonight I want to show you our very first screen that's on monitoring and procedures. And basically my goal tonight is to walk through this document with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about UIL and the information that was released today. And then also want to talk to you about an open enrollment process that is going to open tomorrow at 8 a.m. and will be available for you in our Skyward Student Management System so that you'll have the opportunity to go on and pick between virtual and traditional school. So we're looking forward to that opportunity. So we will start walking through this document here, the processes and procedures for reopening school. The very first document, or the very first, the words that you're going to see there are the self-screening evaluations. So if you're planning on to returning to a traditional school setting, we're going to ask our parents that they would self-screen their child each day before coming to school. The list of symptoms that are listed there, those are things that many of you have seen. These are CDC guidelines. We've talked to physicians who have helped us in this process to develop this list. And these are the symptoms that you'll see here. I'll read through these very briefly. But feverish, a measured temperature greater than or equal to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, loss of taste or smell, that's a big symptom that a lot of people have experienced that have been diagnosed with COVID-19 or tested positive. Cough, difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, headache, chills, sore throat, shaking or exaggerated shivering, significant muscle pain or ache, diarrhea, and unexplained eye irritation. So we need to make sure that we do a very good job of screening our kids before they come. Obviously, if your children are sick, please don't send them to school. But our thoughts are, when they do come to school, that if we can do a really good job of screening the kids before they come into the building, that possibly we could control those things that we can control. We realize that there are people who are asymptomatic, who may be carriers of the virus, but do not distribute any symptoms whatsoever. And so those are things that would be outside of our control, but we can control those who may be symptomatic that come into the building that might have an opportunity to spread that virus. I can't stress to you enough, if you choose the traditional school method, how important communication is going to be between home and school for this upcoming school year. We are going to need to know if a student is tested or an adult's tested. We're going to need to know that information. And so we're asking for a clear line of communication to be established between parents and school and vice versa of what's taking place inside of our building so that we can all help each other and try to reopen in a traditional response as much as possible. If you look through the document here, and we'll make sure that we release this online, but if a child tests positive for a lab-confirmed test of COVID-19, obviously you would contact the school and notify us. Also, if anyone who is within the home contacts and is tested positive, that they would notify the school so that we could work through those procedures and what that may look like to being able to return to a traditional school setting. So if someone has been diagnosed with a positive case of COVID-19, when may they return to school? And so we're going to use a three-pronged approach to address those issues. And as you can see here in the document, number one, at least 72 hours have passed since recovery of fever without the use of any medication. Number two, the individual has improvement in symptoms related to COVID-19. One key symptom of improvement that's crucial is the area of any respiratory issues that may have developed. And then number three, at least 10 days have passed since symptoms first appeared. I know CDC guidelines we've worked with say 14 days for quarantine. Those are things that we're going to have to use a lot of wisdom on between time that symptoms appear, when a test was done, and that quarantine timeline. So we will be working closely, and that's why it's important that we communicate with each other so we can work out an appropriate return date for that kid or that student to be able to come back to school. We also would ask if it was a lab-confirmed test, obviously you'd be under doctor's care, and so a doctor's note would be required to be released to that student to be able to come back to class. We also realize that if it's in the same household, the symptoms may be minor, other tests may not be done, and so we're going to ask families to use extremely good judgment in regards to that before you return and have your kids come to school if there's been a positive case of COVID-19 inside of your home. We know that it is very transmissible in households. That's the way it's typically been moved around, and so we need to use very good judgment on that and communicate well with the school during that time. During this time, if students are in a traditional school setting and they test positive for the virus and are at home, maybe they start to feeling better and they're just under quarantine time, we would encourage them to participate in virtual school so that they can continue with their work and stay caught up as much as possible. So what does arrival to campuses look like? And I want to encourage you guys as you hear this information, I know it's a lot tonight, in the chat box feel free to leave questions. If you're on Zoom with us here tonight, feel free to type into the chat, leave your questions, and we'll work through some of those at the end. I want to try to keep us under an hour if possible and not take up your entire evening, but we'll address as many of those tonight as we can. So what does arrival to school look like? So we've stressed that our goal is going to be to try to screen kids the best we can before they come into the building. And so when they come to campus, we will screen kids appropriately. When they come here or they board a bus, there'll be screening processes that are in place. And so we'll take a look at these each individual one by one. When they come here as a car rider, we'll start there. Our students at our elementary campus, middle school campus, and high school campus will be required to wear a mask upon arrival to school as they begin the screening process. I know many times I talked to a student yesterday at our middle school campus. The neck gaiter is a very popular thing that you can just pull up and pull down. Any type of face covering mask, that is absolutely perfect. But we would ask that those students in elementary, middle school, and high school wear those coverings as they come into the building and get ready to transition to the places where they would go during the day. Upon arrival, there will be a temperature check. So our goal is, and I know this is sometimes very frustrating for parents if you drop your kid off and then all of a sudden they don't feel very well. Parents are on their way to work, they might be going out of town, and they got to turn right back around and come back to the school. So one of the things that we're going to strive to do is we will screen for temperature before the student gets out of the car. We realize that there may be some extra time that we might have to build in for in the mornings because of the process of what that's going to look like, but things will get better. They will get quicker over time as we implement these policies. So student temperature will be taken. Anything below 100 degrees, they'll be able to come into the building and start the process of going through a hand washing station where they'll get hand sanitizer and then directed to their areas of locations for breakfast as far as how the building principal has the logistics set up for that. Once our students are safely inside the classrooms and they're able to appropriately social distance, that the face mask requirement may be relaxed and they could take that off. I can't imagine being a 12-year-old kid and being in a face mask 8 hours a day while you're learning. When we're able to properly social distance, we'll relax that face mask requirement and allow them to take that off. And we've talked to our teachers about this today. That is going to be good common sense of when those things are going to be put in place. If your student wants to wear their face mask the entire day, by all means, that is perfectly fine. So those are our processes for coming in the building. That's what that will look like. One of the big questions that I get is going back to face mask or face coverings is primary campus. Governor Abbott's executive order exempted that age group, and so we just didn't feel like that was age appropriate for our primary students to wear a face mask. I will say this, if you as a parent feel that it's appropriate for them to wear a face mask and you want them to, by all means we're going to support that and we will work with you through that absolutely. So bus transportation, what does that look like? We've got a quick video that we're going to show that we were able to film yesterday. We're going to film a series of commercials and get this information out so that you guys could see this and really see these processes in place early on. Our bus transportation, I'm going to respectfully ask you guys, and this is the tough part, it's hard to social distance on a bus. And so we would really encourage you, if you're planning on doing the traditional school route, if you could help us out by providing transportation for your students this school year, that would be a major help. We realize that's not possible for everyone, but if it is possible, if there's any way possible, that you would help us through that process. So let's take a look at the video. If you're on Facebook Live, you'll be able to see that. Let's take a look at the commercial that was done that will show this process, and you can see this live.
Bus transportation. First, we respectfully ask that you are able to provide transportation for your child this school year. Please help us by doing so. It would be very difficult to practice social distancing on a bus. Second, students will be required to wear masks while riding the bus to and from school. Third, prior to boarding the bus in the morning, students will have their temperature taken by the bus monitor for their particular bus route. A student's temperature below 100 degrees Fahrenheit will need to be recorded to enter the bus. And lastly, please do not leave students or children unattended at the bus stop. They will not be allowed to board a bus if they have a fever detected by our bus monitors.
So we hope this video helps, and this is just a small example of what we're going to do. We've got several videos that we will put out. We appreciate Coach Goodson being our voiceover for that, and those folks that came up and volunteered to film those commercials. So just to go back over that practice for bus transportation, students will be required to wear a mask while riding the bus to and from school. Prior to boarding the bus in the morning, students will have their temperature taken. Obviously, the 100-degree mark is where that will be to be able to enter the bus. We have hand sanitizing stations that are placed right there at the entry of the bus for the kids to use when they come on. And we think that this will be an effective way. The good thing about bus transportation, when those kids get here, there'll be no need for a screening process. And so they can immediately go into the building and go to those designated areas where they'll be having breakfast to start the day. So transitions throughout the building, just to touch on that policy, what that's going to look like. Very similar to our restaurant setup that's been ordered through the governor's executive order. You place a face mask on, and then when you get to the location of where you're going, if it's able to relax that face mask restriction, we would certainly do that. And so that'll be transitions throughout the building. We're also going to provide a midday screening. So as our students enter the lunch period or exit the lunch period, their temperatures will be taken a second time for the day. We realize some kids, they wake up in the morning and maybe they're not feeling well, and a parent gives them some Advil or Tylenol, and they come to school, and then by the middle of the day, their temperature's up, or maybe they're a little bit sicker than they thought they were. And so we're going to put a midday screening process in place so that we can check kids' temperature again. When they come into the dining hall area or wherever we're going to set up for lunches, they'll have hand sanitizer when they enter and when they exit as well. And of course, those masks will be worn during those transition periods on the campuses. Visitors to campus during the day, we're going to welcome you by appointment only as we start the school year. All of our visitors will be encouraged to self-screen before they come up. And then when they do come to the building, they'll be checked for temperature, upon entering the campus they're visiting. And of course, a mask requirement will still be in place as long as Governor Abbott's executive order is in place. This year, our lunches are going to be closed to guests during the beginning of the school year. So parents, if you could help us out, by all means, pack the students' lunch, allow them to eat in the cafeteria through the cafeteria, but coming up and being with them during that lunch period, we're going to ask that you respectfully assist us in haltering that for a little while. And if things relax a little bit, hopefully we can open that back up as the year goes on. So those are our processes for coming in the building. That's a big, broad overview of that. I know there's a lot of different scenarios you're probably thinking through, and I hope we can have some of those pop up as far as questions, and we'll walk through a few of those scenarios tonight. The next document I want to take you to is our UIL guidance. We will check that out. I was really surprised today that the UIL is going to allow football and volleyball and our sports to take place. I really thought they would probably push that back, but I am happy that they've made a decision and we're going to move forward with that. So our kids in less than 13 days will start 2-a-days for volleyball and football. I have not looked through and had time to go through all the guidelines that will be followed for those things, but they are available and that will crank up. First day of practice for volleyball and football will be August the 3rd. That's a couple of Mondays away. And then also the first day for games, volleyball August 10th, and football will be August the 27th. So we're in Conference 3A. Our friends that are in more urban areas in the 5A and 6A divisions, they've got a delay on start before they can actually start up. Marching band, September the 7th, so that's pushed back a little bit, and that's for our classification as well. So those are some things that UIL has put in place. We'll be having a lot of information that comes out. I know Coach Blackwell and Mr. Brandon will be working on guidelines and procedures, and Coach Everett with volleyball. They'll be working on all these things for our kids that are going to participate in those things to make sure that they're following guidelines and we're keeping them as safe as possible. I will say this real quick about UIL activities and extracurricular events in our district. Our board took action last night by accepting a policy and adopting a resolution that to be able to participate in UIL activities and extracurricular activities, a student would have to enroll in a traditional school setting. And so as you think about that and begin to make plans as far as what you might choose for your child between virtual and traditional, the board voted last night to move to a traditional setting to be able to participate in extracurricular and UIL activities. The thought there was the only reason that a virtual school model has been created is because of the health situation. And so if you make a decision to attend virtually, you're doing that out of health concerns for your student or for your family. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to be able to participate in extracurricular and UIL activities such as football when there's no way you're going to be able to social distance. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in those areas. So they thought that was the best measure to go forward, and that's what our district will be doing as we go forward. Tomorrow, let's talk about this real quick. Tomorrow, you guys will have an opportunity to go online and be able to pull up information for the determination statement. So the very first screen that you're going to see when you go into the student management portal through Skyward is you will see a student determination statement. I know there's a lot of decisions that you guys are going to have to make, and I know it's probably been weighing on a lot of our families very heavily. Are we prepared to go back? Do we feel like it's the right thing to do? And I know you've got a lot of tough decisions to make in the next few days, but our determination statement, you'll see this document. This will be the first document that you'll be able to access to choose for your children, and you'll have the opportunity to click virtual school or a traditional school. And so you'll have that option right off the bat and be able to fill in students' names, students' grade, all of that good information so that we can have that for planning purposes as we get ready to start. Once again, this document, all of this student enrollment information, it'll be made available to you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And so as soon as you can, if you make that determination what you're going to do, let's get this information filled out. Let's get the ball rolling. Next Monday, enrollment will actually start in person. And so if you need to come up and drop off proof of residency forms, things like that, we'll have our campus offices available to meet you and to be able to help you out in regards to that. And so that's what that process looks like. Hey, I know you've got, as I stated, a lot of tough decisions, a lot of things to think through, but I want you guys to feel comfortable and know that we're going to be here to help you and to answer questions that you may have. I told our staff this morning, just thinking about, I've read a lot of different articles, a lot of people that are concerned, a lot of people that are unsure, a lot of people that are saying, hey, I don't care what we're going back to school. I know that people are at different places right now. We're a little bit all over the map. But I told our staff this morning and preparing for the school year, because we're prepared to be here, physically be here for our kids. I remember when I was a kid, I grew up here in Mineola, and I remember being at a youth conference at Rose Hill Baptist Church, and I remember there was a state trooper who was there, and I was probably in college, younger 20s, and I'd asked that state trooper who had worked for the Texas Department of Public Safety for a number of years, I asked him, I said, I don't really know how you guys do your job. You make a traffic stop, you walk up to the car, and sometimes if you can run the license plate, you would know who's behind the wheel. Sometimes you just have no idea. How do you do that day in and day out? And he shared with me, he said, I trusted in the Lord a long time ago, and I can go and I can do my job without fear because of my faith. And I tell you what, that's what really sustains me during these times. And we all have personal choices to make. That's my personal stance. That's the way I believe and the way I feel. We also have to be smart, and we also have to realize that we need to do this safely for our kids and for our adults when we do reopen school. But we're going to go and we're going to do our jobs to the very best of our ability. And I'm proud of our staff. I'm very proud of our community. I can't tell you how much you guys have helped out as we opened up, as we went to a virtual school setting in the spring. And the sacrifices were made, the help that was given. And I know our community will stay tight and we'll bond together during this time as well as we work through these traditional school settings and these virtual school settings. One last thing. If you choose the virtual school setting, I want you to know that we'll probably host a orientation so that we can visit with you on virtual to talk about what that's going to look like. There's going to be more guidelines to that than in the spring. I know that was a quick rollout. We had to change and pivot in 1 week. So this next year is going to look a lot different. And a lot of that guidance is given from TEA, but we want to make this as structured as possible for our families as we get ready to prepare for that. Okay? All right, I'm going to be open to some questions here, and I'll look through the chat and see what we've got and see if I can answer any of these questions that are coming up. Got a question here about kids that are playing sports. What kind of safety precautions will be in place for them as far as full contact, what that looks like. All of that guidance for our sports, that will come down from our coaching staff, so be looking for that. I know that the UIL, they've got a ton of information that's out there. I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet. It just came out this morning. But you can find that on UIL's website. You can see those modified schedules and then also their recommendations for those particular sports. So I had one question on Facebook Live. What about a negative test before returning? I think that's going to be a question for the healthcare provider. I know in some cases, I've personally know someone who had a positive test. They were not tested, again, to show a negative test before they came out of quarantine. And so I think that's going to be a healthcare provider. We're going to rely upon our healthcare professionals to sign off before that student returns to come back to school. I saw that's a couple times that question's that's been on there. I have a question here for high school setting as far as endorsements go for students. Will the virtual school affect endorsements? That's a great question, Kay, and I think what we're going to do is for some of our CTE classes, you have to be able to, if we're teaching welding, it's hard to do welding virtually. And there's some of those things that kids would have to come up for to be able to participate in and spend some time in the classroom. And so we've got a great team that's working on those questions to figure out what that looks like. So those kids that have selected those pathways, that they've got some time where they can come up and do those things and demonstrate those skills that they're being taught. See what about 10 and under breathing problems? I think that's going to go back to a local personal decision for your family as far as whether or not you want to attend virtually or attend in school. See a question about classrooms. Are they Are they big enough to appropriately social distance? Yeah, we're going to be working on those things, and I think it's going to be a real indicator as far as what our numbers look like when people make those determination statements, whether or not you want the traditional in-school setting or virtual. Once we kind of see those numbers, we'll have a really good idea to know what kind of space that we're going to be using and how we will be able to social distance those kids and provide education for them. What about bus riders and taking their temps? All of our bus riders, they'll have their temperature taken as they get ready to come on the bus, and then everybody will have a midday screening.
I don't know how to work the mic or anything on this thing, but I do have a question.
Go for it.
All right. If the kid becomes sick, is the child able to do the virtual school if they feel better that day and still be accounted for at school?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be attendance taking time depending on what time they would go home. They're off on virtual, and once we have that orientation for virtual school, we'll be able to outline attendance taking policies and what all that's going to look like. TAs ask us that kids show progress daily, so that's part of the attendance and how that's going to look. And so we'll have all that information coming soon in detail for those kids that choose virtual. So really it would fall into a situation when they left the school, what time, and if they still had time to go home and get online, we could probably help them out and make up that day.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Mize,
Yes, ma'am.
what about the kids in the drinking fountain situations? Is the school going to allow us to send our children with a water bottle that, say, has a pop-up spout that where it's not available for someone to walk by and touch it, where it pops back down in their water bottle and be able to refill them, say, midday?
Great question. So it was asked about water bottles and what that's going to look like. Absolutely. I would say we would definitely allow that, and we'll make provisions for that. Water fountains, that's an issue that's going to be addressed on the campuses, and obviously those are common gathering areas, and so they're not going to be operable, but we will make provisions for those kids that need water during the day. But I think that's a great place to start. Bring a water bottle, bring a container, and that would be a good move, no doubt.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I see one about the absentee policy this year. So for kids with COVID, so it is state law that kids have to be in 90% attendance. And so, that's a state law that's put out there. Here's what we say about that. Obviously, this is a very unique situation. We have grade level committee meetings, campus committee meetings that determine attendance and look at that. And I will say this, if your child has a test positive or is sick during this time, there's going to be a lot of grace in those areas as they try to meet that 90% attendance mark. So those campus committees will meet, they'll make decisions based off that, and lots of grace there. So I wouldn't worry about that a whole lot.
If it spikes, if the COVID spikes, will it absolutely shut down the school, or will y'all let us know before it?
Yeah, great. So great question. The question was if case count continues to spike, if there's a huge spike, and we deal with a lot of situations here at the school, we're going to be working with Ms. Paula Thomas at Net Health and working with our county schools to be able to figure out what those guidelines will look like and set some of those marks. So, we could say, if we got to this certain point, this is the point where we would make that decision, and we'll be working at the county level on that to try to determine some of that. So it's a great question. So I see one of the questions about exams. Currently right now, one thing we do know for sure is they've said that STAR testing will take place, end-of-course testing will take place. We passed a resolution last night, the Board of Trustees did, and plan on sending copies to Representative Hefter, Senator Hughes, and Governor Abbott, that the state waive STAR testing and end-of-course testing for the 2020-21 school year. There's so much uncertainty, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to have the STAR test hanging over our heads. Our teachers need to relax, prepare content for kids, and go to work, and we don't see a benefit in that for our students. So that resolution was passed last night and will be sent off. See a question about school start date. Yes, August the 13th, Thursday. August the 13th is the start date. Questions about connectivity. I see, Carl, I appreciate your question about will we be able to provide hotspots for the kids. Our game plan is to absolutely be able to do that. If you choose a virtual setting, make sure you got the technology and make sure that we have hotspots in place. We've had some great, the Mineola Meredith Foundation was outstanding in helping us out with getting hotspots to families that were in need. And I think in the springtime, I know there may be a few connectivity issues, but our community helped out with that a lot in public spaces. But we want to make sure that we try to get those to you as soon as possible. And that'll be during the registration process that we'll get all that out to you guys. So be looking for information from your campuses when that comes out. Ms. D'Angelo, great question about if what's the protocol for a teacher in the classroom that tests positive. So we will be notifying those parents of the children that are in that classroom. That person will obviously be quarantined. This is where it gets really tricky and how CDC defines close contact. So close contact is within 6 feet without a mask for a period of 15 minutes or more. And so we're going to have to use a lot of wisdom in those areas, and those are some of those things that we're thinking through and talking to other superintendents and really getting some feedback on. We'll have a really good detailed plan in place for that, probably a flow chart to how we'll conduct that personnel-wise here in the district. So excellent question on that, and I'll follow up with you on it.
When we go to sign them into school tomorrow, do we go ahead and pay for the Chromebooks, or do we just wait?
I would hold off on that and talk to your campus for that. Question was about Chromebooks. As you go through the registration process, you can get with your campuses on that for your child's individual campus and work through that. I see Angel asking a question, how virtual school will work. We are working on our plan for that right now and getting the details together, and we'll make sure that we set up we'll do like a virtual school orientation for each of the campuses where you can log on, check out that information, and see how that's done. I stated a little bit earlier, there's going to be more requirements to it this year than there were last year just because of the guidelines from the state and how attendance is done. So there'll be a lot of information coming for that for virtual school. Will primary school have recess, and what about lunch? Brandy, absolutely. We want our kids to have as traditional school as possible. I think recess is vital for our young kids and our high school kids. They need to get out and have a little break from time to time. So definitely we're going to try to make sure that happens, and that those facilities and things would be cleaned after use and taken care of. So, can a child play football if they miss part of jacket camp? Yes, ma'am. Jacket camp's not mandatory, but an opportunity for the kids to come and work out. We've had a lot of kids that have come to work out this summer and really getting after it. And I was over in the band hall the other day, percussion clinicians were going on, so they were doing a lot of kids up working on things before the school year is even started. So Christina, that's a great question. What about the children who have to be at the bus stop with older siblings due to both parents having to be at work before 7 a.m.? We really need those parents to help us out by trying to be at the stop with their kids, because if we check temperature and they're not able to board the bus, then where they're able to go, that's going to be a problem for us. So we're going to need some help on that, big time. So great question from Ms. Murphy. What if you choose in school and then decide we want to choose virtual learning? So if you're in traditional school and you see things like, hey, we don't feel comfortable with that right now, we want to go to virtual, you can go to virtual at any time. But what we're going to ask on the virtual side is, if you go virtual, to stay virtual for the first 9-week grading period before you make that transition back in. And I know there's some that'll be on that fence that they want to see how things maybe are going to go, how they'll start, and maybe come back after that. But you can go from traditional to virtual at any time. But for the virtual back to traditional, it'll be a 1 grading period before they'll be able to come back. Will kids be confined to the classroom? We want to have a traditional experience as possible, Michael, and have them to be able to move around as much as possible. I see a response. As I understand it, parents can make the choice to send kids to school with symptoms They're to use good judgment. If you have symptoms, please try to keep your children home. We'll check for symptoms or check for screening when we come in. Temperature will be the big one that we'll check for, and do that a couple times during the day. But we really need your help. If your kids are having symptoms, please don't send them to school. Will school be a regular 5 days a week? Yes, ma'am. And normal times? Yes. Ms. Blaylock, what's the protocol when a child leaves school sick and ends up testing positive for COVID? As soon as that test came back, we would be contact the school as soon as possible, where we can contact others that may be within close contact with that child and let them know about that. Primary school, meet the teacher. We'll have all that information coming out pretty quick, so be looking for that. That'll be on each of your individual campuses.
Would it be good to have your child take a vitamin supplement or a nutritional supplement before they go to school every morning? That's
a great question. I'm not the healthcare expert. I have no idea. I'm not for sure. That's going to be a personal decision for the family and for your healthcare provider. April, for the time being, on the parents being able to visit during lunch, we're gonna respectfully ask that be halted for the time being, and then hopefully we'll be able to open up a little bit later as we see how things go. Ms. Blaylock asked, will middle and high school students still switch classrooms during the day? Yes, ma'am. That's some of those areas, CTE areas and things that they'll go to. There's specialized equipment there that they'll need to be able to get to during their schedule. Yes, on the mask requirement, 3rd grade and up, we believe that's age appropriate, and that's also following Governor Abbott's executive order. Cindy, good question. Thinking about first day of school, we were talking with our staff earlier today. I couldn't imagine a kindergartner coming the first day and not being able to have mom or whoever their guardian is to be able to walk them in the door. So, absolutely, we'll screen for that person, and they'll meet the mask requirement and be able to come in, and one family member be able to walk that child in.
I have a question about the mask.
Sure.
Governor Abbott said 10 years and younger didn't have to have a mask.
Correct.
Is that going to be something you guys push for in the school?
Yeah, that's correct. So primary, we didn't feel like that was age appropriate, and so primary campuses would not have to. That's going to be a parent choice too. If they want kids, 2nd grader, to wear a mask, by all means, I think that's important for them to be able to wear a mask.
I have a 3rd grader with asthma, and that concerns me.
Yeah, I think as far as healthcare needs, I think it's part of the governor's executive order. If there's a health health situation with wearing a mask, you can get a doctor's release on that.
Okay.
I believe that's part of the executive order.
Okay.
As I know there's a ton of questions coming in, and I know I'm not going to be able to hit all of them tonight, and I want to be a respecter of time. Let me check Zoom real quick, see if there's any more that's in there. So here's a good question. If a child does virtual, will the teacher be on Zoom the entire time? And so that's something that we're working through. It's going to be probably pretty hard for those teachers to set up a Zoom link for the entire time during the day for those kids, but a lot of recording of the lessons, being able to post that out to our learning management system to be able to give kids the opportunity to access that. One of the things that are going to be in the requirements is that contact time. I don't want our kids that are in virtual school to lose contact with their teacher, not be able to sit down with them and have a Zoom and have some of that conversation. So there's going to be requirements there that will have to be met for that daily progress measure as we roll out. Sometimes, yeah, we'll look at that when we see the number of kids, see kind of what that's all going to look like, and see if we have to make any adjustments. I know the car riding line, especially at the beginning of the year, I know it's pretty crazy. And so if it's going to take a little bit longer to get those kids in, we'll look at that and then we'll try to adjust accordingly on that. I had that question on Zoom. I had a question about if somebody goes to take a test, the days that pass between a kid or an adult being able to get that test back. Obviously, if you get tested, please stay home and wait for those results to come in and then notify.
Our kids used to come to the school in the morning. They eat breakfast at home. They always went to the gymnasium before the teachers sent them to their rooms. Is that going to be the protocol this year?
That's a great question. We'll work on those logistics, and we'll talk with our campus principal, and they'll have some information for you guys on that right now, or pretty soon. I shouldn't say right now.
For the elementary school?
Elementary is Miss Brittany Thompson.
Okay.
Hello.
I think that's Miss Thompson there on the Zoom.
I'm Miss Thompson.
Hi. We are working diligently to get that information to y'all as quickly as we can.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, for doctor, good question, Sean, on the doctor appointments. If you have to come up and pick up a kid, what does that look like? So, we talked about a couple of things there. If that's where you call and check in, and we have a staff member that can walk that kid out to make sure they get in the vehicle with you, or come in and screen really quick and pick that child up. We'll work and make that work really well, where that's not a big hassle, because we know kids are going to have orthodontist appointments and different things that are going on. So, yeah, we're going to work with you and make that a smooth process. How long will it take for new students' applications take to be approved? That's just going on skyward and being able to work through that. And if you're a resident here, that's just a process of enrollment, and so we'll get that taken care of as soon as we can. Will desks be cleaned between students? Yes, that's going to be a requirement. I was in the classroom when I was a teacher. As the bell was getting ready to ring, it was always clean up your workstation, make sure everything's neat and tidy, and part of those requirements will be to clean desk. We'll wipe those down and get ready for that transition period as new kids come in. That question about welding, if your child is, if it's virtual, how does it work? For some of those things, for certifications, they'll have to come up and to actually do some of that actual practice. And so we'll work with kids to make that happen, and we'll be in contact soon on the CTE part of it. Jeffrey, thank you for your question on local clinics only allowing one person per family to be tested. What we would say is if you've got it, if it's in your family, I would be very hesitant until everybody's well to send kids. I mean, we almost have to assume that they could be carriers, or it'd really be nice if everybody could get tested. That might be something we just have to work through with our healthcare providers and get some more information on that. But I appreciate you sharing that. I didn't realize that. Does your child, Alexandria, does your child have to get tested before being allowed to attend this year? No, ma'am. That's not a requirement. Any other questions? Anything that I'm missing?
Is there any shots that we should be concerned about our children getting before going to school? Because the doctor said there wasn't anything that y'all were recommending this year.
Yeah, that's going to be healthcare provider, and obviously what the requirements are for any type of immunization for the state. I think there's a document you can sign off. If you don't do that with your children, there's a document that you can sign off and have notarized. It just has to be on file. Teacher assignments for students coming soon. Ms. Davis, will middle school kids be able to bring water bottles? Yes, I think that's a good practice. Bus social distancing, going to be tough. Yeah, we're going to need parents to help us out and to be able to bring your children if you can. If they ride the bus, yes, they will be required to wear a mask. See some questions about if a test positive from a kid, or everyone in that class have to be quarantined. Kristen, that's the part that we're going to have to use a lot of good judgment on, a lot of wisdom to be able to determine who was in close contact with that person. And those are one of those things that we will be working through to determine that. The hard part about this summer and what we saw in athletics were that if you had a positive test, let's just say athletics for summer camps, if you had a positive test, the entire group went home. And if that's going to be the case, if we can't determine who that local or that close contact was, it sure is going to be tough to have a traditional school under a setting like that. So each of our campuses will host a virtual meeting where they'll go over all those requirements. Abby, good question. If you decide to do virtual school, can we change our mind after school started? We're going to ask that we wait for the 9-week grading period. So from virtual school back to traditional school, it'll be the grading period before they'd be able to come back. Gifted and talented, that'll be a campus issue as far as how the principals are setting that up with teachers and how that'll be addressed. Dana, thank you for that comment. It is a process where we're all working together. Appreciate your prayers, our staff, and all of our parents and kids. Thank you for that. Chris and Brandy, good question on the mask. We're gonna, if they're riding the bus, we're gonna try to get them in a mask. I understand Governor Abbott's executive order, and we tried to follow airplane requirements on that. And I was trying to think back on I recently flew on a trip and was required to wear a mask the entire time. I don't know how that works on the governor's executive order. I'll find out about that on under 10 and see if that needs to be tweaked a little bit. Good question. I'll get back to you on that.
What could possibly happen if you send your child with a mask to school and then they turn around and don't wear it?
Yeah, we're gonna really encourage it and make sure that, just like any type of thing, talking to kids, yeah, we're gonna really encourage them to wear it, and that's gonna be from home, and really home reiterating that to kids, and our staff will reiterate it to them as well.
Okay, good, because I have one that'll fight me all the way if he wants to go back to school.
Right. Heather, that's a great question. If one tests positive, attends more than one class with all the students in one day, will everyone that was in that class, will they need to be quarantined? That's going to be that close contact question, and that's a lot of wisdom, and that's one of those tough, complicated questions that we'd have to look through. Restrooms will be cleaned frequently, Ms. Walker, absolutely. Thank you for that comment. We got about 5 more minutes left, and that'll be an hour. If anybody else has any more questions or anything that I didn't get a chance to cover. I know there's some questions that are out there, that tracing piece, the close contact piece, those are things that we're going to still continue to work through, and we'll get some solid answers out to you guys on that, what that looks like.
So do we sign them up tomorrow on the virtual deal, like on the website?
Yes, ma'am. So when you go into the Skyward Student Management System and you're able to do enrollment, that very first page that you'll see, and I'm going to ask Mr. Parrish if he can pull that back up for us. It will be it'll be a piece of documentation that the very first page that you'll have a choice to pick between virtual and traditional school, and so it'll make you choose one of those before you can go into the next pages to enroll. And I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot to think through. I mean, you might come out of this tonight and say, "Well, I'm not for sure how I feel about it." And that's, I understand that. Take some time, talk to the staff, talk to your principal, your building principal. Come by and see us. Give me a call. Be glad to visit with you about it.
Okay. So once they get in there, if there is a case and they have to be sent home for virtual school, they'll just stay on virtual school for the whole 9 months. Then they'll get back into regular school?
So if they're in a traditional setting and they go home for quarantine, they wouldn't be required to stay out that entire 9-week grading cycle. So once they got to feeling better and they got cleared from a doctor, they would be able to come back.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
You bet. And for those that maybe tuned in late, you missed the meeting, and this is all recording, so you'll be able to go back and watch some of it and be able to see all those guidelines. Like I said, we'll have the commercials for the protocols and all that good stuff. That'll be coming up pretty quick. We'll get that posted out.
Mr. Mize?
Yeah, sure. Yes, ma'am.
I've had several questions on the Zoom chat, and I'm just wondering if you're able to view those questions. Because I think you've seen all the questions from Facebook, but
Miss Hughes, is that your question? Miss Dolores Hughes, is that who signed in?
Yes, that's who's talking.
Are kids allowed to do some classes traditional and others virtually? So there will be. I mean, for a traditional school setting, some of your dual credit classes through TJC, those are done virtually, but we won't have a mixture between virtual and in person. The only classes that I could see being like that are kids that are doing virtual classes that are in high school working on CTE certifications that have to have time to come up and actually participate in certain areas to be certified. So that's the only classes that I can envision for that, outside of that kid that's doing the traditional that just has the dual credit classes. So not a whole lot of traditional and virtual at any level but the high school maybe. That's the only instance we could see that. It is one way or the other. I mean, that's for the most part, the majority of students, it's going to be virtual or traditional.
Okay, were any other schedules considered, like A day, B day, or,
Yeah, so yeah, there's some of those models that are out there. We wanted to try to have as traditional start as possible. And once we start getting the numbers in for enrollment and everything and what that's going to look like, who's choosing virtual versus traditional, I think that's something that we can take a greater look at if there's things scheduling wise that need to be fixed. I wouldn't anticipate a major shift in a schedule or B schedule at this time. That's a great question though.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Definitely be a cleaning plan in place to clean areas.
Mr. Mice?
Yes.
Hello, this is Mr. Hughes. I want to ask real quick for the student athletes.
Yes, sir.
By UIL rules for the first 9 weeks, if they do not do traditional, then they will not be able to participate in their sports?
That's correct. Yes, sir. So that was voted on last night by the Board of Trustees. So to be able to participate in any extracurricular or UIL activity, they do have to choose traditional school. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. And then I guess what will be considered in the future, once we all start going back to school, if the kids do traditional, and based on the current events of the ebb and flow of how many are maybe testing positive or any kind of community spread and so forth, that might be altered.
Yes,
so
sir.
We can go ahead and take in consideration, the health and safety of our children, but at the same time allow them to go ahead and participate in extracurricular activities and sports for the school and for themselves.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like as far as that piece would be considered, Chris. That's going to be, we would have to take a look at that pretty hard and heavy. Kind of the rationale behind that when we were talking that through was, the only reason that the virtual school is set up is to give parents the opportunity to choose virtual because there's a healthcare concern inside the home.
Yes, sir.
And so to say that I'm going to choose virtual, but I still want to do all the extracurricular and UIL, there's a lot of time, energy, and effort with other kids, other adults that would be involved in that. And so it was kind of the feeling that, they can do those things, and especially football, sports, close contact, body contact, if we can do those things and we feel comfortable, then we could choose that traditional school route as well. So that's kind of the rationale behind the decision for that. So
Yes, sir. No, thank you. I'm just trying to envision, if we start having problems once the
Yes,
kids
sir.
go back to, go to school.
yeah.
We want them to go traditionally. It's just,
Yes, sir. I know it's a lot of decisions to make. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time, sir.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Chrissy, I see your question about the number of students in each classroom. Will it be decreased to compensate for the 6 feet distancing? We're going to look at that as soon as, the number of students that will be virtual versus traditional. We'll be able to make some decisions after that once we see some of the enrollment numbers, how that's going to work. Also, all of our spaces, it might not be traditional to have a classroom in the cafeteria area where you've got a whole lot of space, but some of those areas may have to be utilized during this time. So all of our facility spaces will be considered to make sure that we can social distance the very best we can. As I've got just after 7 o'clock, and I want to say thank you again for tuning in tonight. I hope this has been helpful for you. We'll get all this information posted up, and can't stress to you enough, if you have other questions, you get to thinking about things, don't hesitate to call us, send us an email, talk to your campus principals, visit with them about what things are going to look like, and we want you to make the very best decision that's in the health interest of your family and your children. And we understand you got a big responsibility, and we're going to do the very best that we can to make sure that we're educating students to the very best of our ability, and that if your kids are going to Mineola ISD, they're taken care of and educated. And if there's anything else, I'll dismiss us. And thanks again, you guys, for tuning in. And y'all have a great evening. Thank you.